Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 23. Today my guest is Marley Peifer, a nature journal educator and mentor who's also the creator of the Nature Journal Show, a weekly YouTube show specifically about nature journaling. In his videos, Marley takes us along with him on adventures, nature journaling outdoors or in extreme places. He also shares information on his process, techniques, gear and favourite art tools, as well as interviews with other nature journalists. Marley has a lot of experience mentoring others on how to create a good mindset, how to start, how to keep going, stay motivated, bust barriers, and journal more. Let's chat with him about all of this. Marley, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. This is really exciting.
I'm so excited to talk to you. When I was creating the questions, I didn't know where to go because you've just got such a broad experience base and a broad level of things that you hit on with the Nature Journal Show. So I'm just going to start right at the beginning, and I'd love to chat about your childhood in nature. Were you always connected to nature like you are now?
I think so. I don't have a memory of it, but my mom said that when I was a toddler at some point, they came outside and I was in the garden or crawling around next to the house, and I had picked up this tarantula. And I don't personally remember that, but I do remember that we had a great garden in San Diego in Southern California. And I was always out there, and there's a lot of natural areas near where we lived with everybody down there would just call it the canyon. You know how sometimes people say, oh, we're going to the forest or the woods or whatever. Well, there was the canyon, and there are these Southern California chaparral ecosystem. It's sort of like a Mediterranean climate, and I would love exploring out there and watching animals. And then when I was 5, we went to Costa Rica for the first time, and my mom took a sabbatical, and I think we spent like 5 months down there.
Oh,
and
wow.
That was huge for me. You know, it was just climbing trees and eating mangoes and coconuts and finding snakes and frogs and lizards and weird stuff, and the ocean and just loving that. So I was definitely, as a kid, just loved being outside, being in nature, catching things, touching, cats. I loved cats as well. And eating fruit, climbing trees, all of that stuff.
Yeah, so it's there from the beginning.
Definitely, yeah.
From there, I'd love to chat about nature journaling, how you came to nature journaling, how you learned about it, and now how you've come to this point where now you're living and breathing nature journaling every day.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, because I think for a lot of us, we become nature journalers when we learn what nature journaling is, as opposed to like starting a particular thing. Like if we find out, oh, I've been doing that, or we learn that we were already doing it, or it somehow connects things that we were already passionate about. And for me, when I was a kid, I loved drawing and I loved nature, but I didn't understand how to connect them, and no one really showed me that. And I would be catching lizards and running around in the wild areas where I grew up. And then I would go home and I would draw, but I would draw, wizards and dragons and knights and kung fu people and stuff like that. And didn't really realize there's very few drawings from my youth that are of nature or of things that I saw. So I don't really have like a record of that aspect of my childhood, even though I know that I was in nature a lot and loved it. And so I didn't actually start nature journaling until relatively recently. I think I actually learned about nature journaling in around, I think it was 2014 actually, because I was going through some career changes, and I had recently found out about this science illustration program um, for graduate students in the Monterey Bay area, and I something clicked for me, and I thought, wow, this is a really amazing career. There are people who get to draw like lizards and deep sea fishes as their job. That sounds amazing. I didn't know people still got paid to do things like that. I always thought that was something from the past, you know? And funny enough, that program originated at the university I had gone to school with, but had just been kind of cut because it wasn't like hard science enough.
Okay.
I started researching that program and emailing as many of the alumni as I could. And one of them was John Muir Laws. I think I emailed 30 people maybe, and maybe 10 responded. And one of them was John Muir Laws, Jack, as we know him. And he not only responded, but he said, "Come show me your portfolio for your application, and I'll help you out a little bit." And so, you know, sight unseen, never met me before anything. He invites me to his house to go over my portfolio of drawings for this application. And so I went, I met him. I think shortly thereafter, I had heard about his field guide before, but shortly thereafter I got some of his other books, and I learned about nature journaling. I started going to some of his nature journaling field trips, and I started nature journaling. I think I have like 40 of these books back there, sketchbooks. I started with right around that time, 2014. I started with a particular type of sketchbook that I've been keeping consistently now since then. And I had done journaling, other types of journaling, and other types of art a little bit off and on, but I never realized that I hadn't seen that synthesis explained so clearly. So it was one of those moments where someone had to explain it to me, the connection. And when I saw how it accelerated my learning and combined my interests, it was like, oh, this is what I need to be doing. And so then,
This is my thing.
yeah, exactly. I just really got into it from then on.
That's so cool that it brought together two things that you were passionate about, and you just had to have that link, and then suddenly it exploded, and yeah, you found your groove, you found your future and your passion. That's so cool. And so here you are now, a nature journal teacher and mentor, and I'd love to dig in a little bit deeper with you about certain aspects of nature journaling and get your ideas and opinions about certain things. So you had this experience with interviewing Roseanne Hanson where you guys were brainstorming about mindset. I know mindset is a big one for you, and you do an amazing lecture on a good nature journaling mindset. But one of the aspects of that is that we all have this fear inside us about making art and about producing good pictures that we can show people. And so you and Roseanne were sort of jamming on this idea that we have all this fear, and you came up with Fearless Friday. And I'd love for you to talk about Fearless Friday, what it is, and that thing inside us that we have this fear of making pretty pictures.
Yeah, I think the way I think about it sometimes, and I forgot that came up in that conversation with Roseanne. Maybe it comes up in conversations with lots of people because it's something that I am passionate about, because on an intellectual level, I feel like it's the most important thing that I can be doing to help people get better. And, you know, I can teach people about specific techniques around like using watercolor or natural history skills, like how to be more observant, you know, specific factoids about plants and animals. But what I've found is the biggest obstacle for people, and the thing that is hardest to learn, is the how to deal with the fear and the mindset stuff. And like getting good at drawing or getting good at watercolor or even becoming a good naturalist, a lot of those things, a lot of those skills will naturally get better as you practice them. So, the expression pencil miles, like just the idea that putting in a lot of drawing, you're going to naturally get better. However, these fears and these mindset things, those don't naturally just get better with more practice. And what I've found is that actually a lot of experienced artists have these crazy blind spots and issues. And so it's really hard to talk about them. It's really hard to notice them in yourself and correctly diagnose them. And it's really hard to teach them. So I really want to go there because I think that actually is what can help people the most. And the way I think about it sometimes is that, these adults that I work with kids and I work with adults. And the adults that I work with are basically, I have to deal with all of these wounds that they have, and they're, sometimes it's it's not the wound itself, but maybe the protection mechanism that they developed usually from their childhood. And I think one of the main ones, and one that people have done a lot of research on, is this whole growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And sometimes people think when I say growth mindset that I'm talking about this like capitalist growth thing, but it's not that. And so,
could you explain a little about that? Because some people haven't heard of it.
Yeah. So there's this woman, Carol Dweck, and she has a book called Growth Mindset. And she and a lot of other people have done research on this, mostly with kids, and they've looked at how people deal with challenges and deal with problems, and how they think about it and how that affects their results. So, they've done all these experiments where they give kids really challenging math problems, and they give kids at different ages challenging math problems, many of which are like basically unsolvable or, that the kids way beyond the kids' level. And then they, some of the kids, they like prime them. So they give them certain types of feedback or compliments or say certain things to set them up. And then they record the results. And basically there's a huge body of research that shows that when you think about problem solving and skills and capabilities, your own or other people's, when you think about that as like a fixed resource or a talent, my least favorite word, when you think about them that way, that actually puts a huge limit on your ability to learn and to successfully improve in that area. And if you think about it as something that you can get better at, that you can grow at, and it doesn't have to be delusional thinking, but just thinking, oh, instead of saying, oh, I'm bad at math, I won't be able to solve this problem, so I'm not going to try. If you think, oh, you realize, oh, well, I haven't done a problem like this before. I bet if I practice this more, I could get good at it. And the crazy thing is that, like around art, whichever side you are on, if you're identified as talented or if you're identified as not talented, it has a lot of negative effects. And so, for example, I've tried to, in my research around growth mindset, I've tried to diagnose myself and reflect on the feedback I got as a kid. And I think that people told me I was good at drawing. And if you're told that you're talented or you're just kind of innately good at something, there's a whole Pandora's box of problems that can come from that, including perfectionism, procrastination. A lot of times you won't try new things. So if you're complimented for, drawing dragons or whatever, and people give you a lot of positive feedback and say you're good at that, then you'll be afraid to draw other things because you notice, oh, this is not coming out good. And it's unconscious, but you know unconsciously that you're being rewarded for the product. You're not being
Yes.
told, wow, I noticed, Marley, that you've spent the last 6 hours drawing in your room. That's incredible focus. That's really amazing. If you get that type of feedback, that can lead in the other direction, the growth mindset direction. And so, yeah, this
Yes.
whole growth mindset thing, there's a lot of
So
information
interesting.
about it. And I think it has a huge impact in nature journaling, in art. And art is even worse than a lot of these other fields because in kind of the dominant sort of Western culture today, this was not always the case. Art is thought of as something, like there's a lot of people who promote themselves as self-taught artists.
Hmm.
There's no self-taught engineers and dentists. No, who would hire a self-taught dentist? Nobody. And so it's just weird that is considered something that is not like a buildable skill. It's like you just teach yourself or you're just born an artist. Nature journaling has a lot of things built into it that help deal with this problem. However, the problem is still there. A lot of people have it. It's hard to recognize in ourselves. It manifests in a lot of different ways. And we continue to perpetuate it all the time. So in my work with children, I'm super careful about feedback. And I
Yes.
try to notice in myself when I'm about to give a kid feedback on something. They might just be lucky even sometimes in something that they do, and it comes out really good. And if you give them positive feedback, then they realize, oh, I'm not actually being told that I did any work or anything. It's just like that, that thing came out good, and that's problematic. So we have to all be thinking about this, and it's not like you read the book and then you're an angel afterwards. We have to like work on it with ourselves and think about it when we interact with other people, especially kids.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
So Fearless Friday is all about posting pictures aren't that aren't the prettiest pictures, and I love this idea. And yeah, I'd love for you to have a little chat about that, about Fearless Friday and what it means.
Yeah, so I think that conversation with Roseanne was a live show, and someone in the comments suggested Fearless Friday. Of course, the alliteration helps remember it, and then I afterwards realized there's some other hashtag for like an American football thing, I think, that uses Fearless
Okay.
Friday. However, it has been a sort of adopted in the nature journaling community a little bit, and yeah, the idea is to at least have one day where people can post where there's where we propose that people post the pages that they normally wouldn't share. And I had a whole episode of my show where I shared a bunch of my pages that I hadn't before. And I think this gets into the whole Fearless Friday thing um, gets into some of the effects of social media. So, for
Mm-mm.
example, or just kind of group dynamics in general, because it's I don't want to say it's inevitable, but the way things are right now, a beautiful nature journal page is going to get more likes on Facebook, and people are going to notice it more on Instagram. And even though a lot of those people that like it are the same people that go around preaching that it's not about the pretty picture. And so that creates a hypocrisy um, in people's minds, and it's happening. It's real. And so I think it's okay to like beauty. I mean, I love beauty and pretty pages and all of that. So I'm not going to lie about that. And we shouldn't trick ourselves into thinking that we don't care about the pretty picture at all, but we should recognize that might not be in alignment in with what we say we're nature journaling for. And so this is what I call like a hidden expectation.
Mm.
Is a lot of people do have an expectation. Their teacher just told them, they just did a class with John Muir Laws, or they did a class with me or you or someone, and that person said it's not about the pretty picture, it's about connecting with nature, it's about being curious, it's about finding wonder, it's about learning, it's about all of these things. And so consciously, intellectually they believe that, but there's still part of them that just wants to be able to make a pretty picture. And so coming to terms with the fact that we're more complex beings like that is the first step. You have to accept that that is true. Don't be in denial about that. But then remind yourself, that that's not all of what nature journaling is. And the weird thing is that if you're not worried about the product and you end up nature journaling more, you end up in the end having better products. And so
Yes.
Fearless Friday is like, the idea is to help just kind of show that everybody has pages that don't look beautiful, and that usually there's these multiple biases that are happening, or filters, I should say, that happen, that create this illusion on social media that makes people go into this whole comparison thing. And it's like, that's a huge problem in general with social media, because when 1,000 years ago, you would compare your beauty, your intelligence, your artistic skills, your singing skills to a really small group of people, and you were probably pretty good. You were probably pretty high up there, and probably felt okay about yourself. But now it's like you're comparing yourself to millions and millions,
Yeah.
to so many people on social media, not to mention the fact, so that's already a problem. Just like demographically, you're comparing yourself to such a huge population that you're not going to be in that, and the people we see are the ones that are in that 99th percentile of like whatever body shape or whatever facial symmetry or singing or athletic capabilities or art. I mean, if you want to feel bad about your art, go on social media every single day, follow all of these amazing artists out there. Some of them are like 12 and they're drawing circles around you. And if you're comparing yourself to that, so that's the first problem. Second problem is those people aren't posting their other pages. They're not posting the ones. Yeah, exactly. And then the likes get, the pages in the pages and the photos that look the best, or fit a certain kind of aesthetic will get the most likes and the most shares and the most comments. So those will come to the top. And so there's like at least 3 ways that it's kind of biasing what you see. And that, in the nature journaling community, creates the problem, that is not really representing the reality. And I think that causes all kinds of, people are intimidated. I talk to people almost every day who go on the Nature Journal Club Facebook page, and they're afraid to post their pages. I would say there's no way to really, there might be a way in the analytics to look at this, but of the like 15,000 people that are on the Nature Journal Club Facebook page, there's probably like 500 whose posts are seen. And everybody else is either not posting, or they're just consuming, or their posts aren't getting seen. And so that is problematic, because our community is not about consuming content. It's about creating and connecting for yourself.
Yes. So I really do think that Fearless Friday, this idea that we as a community make an effort to not curate as much, to not just post the pretty pictures, and also to be super supportive of people who do that, not just clicking the ones that are appealing, that are the prettiest. And I thank you for that, because that's a really big, important thing to do. I'm interested to talk to you about mentoring. So I know that you are a mentor to people in the real world through your workshops, through your community, and you're also really mentoring the whole nature journaling community through the Nature Journal Show, because you're teaching about all these things, all these different aspects of nature journaling. And sorry, a huge cockatoo went by. Did you hear that? Can you hear it?
All I hear is like shh.
Oh, it's like it's a cockatoo.
Oh wow! Is it that pink kind?
No, that's a galah. It's
oh my gosh! I need a nature journal. Those, you have such cool parrots in Australia.
Yeah. This one is a sulfur-crested cockatoo, and they're about that. They're pretty big, like as big as a bread box.
They're mostly white, right?
Yes, white with a yellow crest.
Oh, okay. I'm getting, I love that. I've seen them in zoos before and in photos, but wow.
Yeah, mentoring. So you do this through your channel, and I'd love to talk about mentoring, the importance of that for you, how we can support each other. I'd love to hear some advice about how you do it. One of the important things you've already mentioned is about giving feedback in a really positive way. But I'm interested in this process of mentoring each other. Jack's talked about we can all, whatever level you are, even if you're a beginner, be a mentor to someone else. And I'd love your thoughts on that about mentoring.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say it's not just about positive feedback. And also, I think yeah, so I'm not going to go into that because that's not specifically your question. But
when I said positive, I guess I meant positive as in not doing harm, like
right.
not necessarily giving positive feedback, but not doing harm by praising pretty pictures.
Right. Yeah. So I'm all about giving positive feedback around effort,
Yes.
and around input, not
Mm.
around output. So
Mm-hmm.
if a kid or someone that I'm working with, if I see that they have a beautiful page, but they didn't try hard, I'm not going to give them positive feedback because I think that would actually be harmful. So
Mm-hmm.
just to
Mm-hmm.
clarify that, because I think it's really confusing and sometimes it's hard to know what's what. And for a long
Yes.
time, we've been psychologists and education experts have given the incorrect advice, I think, around the feedback.
No, that's an important point.
Yeah. So, but as far as mentoring goes, I'm a firm believer in teaching I'm actually, what I'm interested in is learning. And I think teaching is actually a subcategory of learning. And I think I'm a strong believer in teaching something before you think you know what you're doing.
Yes.
And that through teaching, it's selfish in some ways. You will learn faster and you'll learn more when you're tested by teaching. And I also think that teaching or mentoring is a two-way street. So every single interaction that I have with a kid, for example, let's just talk about adults and kids because I think that simplifies it in some ways. But every time I have an interaction with a kid, I think of it as a learning experience and a two-way street learning experience. And when you put yourself in that position and you're able to actually listen to what the kid or the student is saying and notice what they're seeing and what they're noticing, then you put yourself in a place where you can learn from them. And it also just makes it so that they're more open to you. And so I think the top down style of teaching is really problematic in a lot of
Mm.
ways. And I have learned so much from working with kids. And the funny thing too is that I often would have, a week where I do the exact same exercise, and I don't tell the adults this all the time, but I do the exact same exercise with a group of kids, and then later that week I do that same exercise with a group of adults. And the differences between kids and adults aren't as big as we sometimes think. And there's so much, kids are really, like if you want to learn about learning, you need to look at kids because they're the masters of learning. And a lot of adults, we've lived for so long that we take things for granted. So that's one of the things that our brain does that is beneficial, because if you're walking around like a 3-year-old, you wouldn't, by the time you get your shoes on, you're like distracted by some other thing, and you're like, this glass of water is amazing, and you'll be there for 10 minutes playing with the water. And that would be a problem. Sure, that's understandable from a survival perspective. But the thing is our brain is so good at doing that we don't notice the sunsets. We don't notice the things, the snail like eating a leaf. We just walk
Mm-hmm.
past all of that stuff. And our brain is really good at filtering out information. And so what we need to do, luckily we have a part of our brain that can, like our metacognition can notice our own thinking and step back and be like, oh, I'm doing that adult thing where I'm filtering out all this information. Now there are times for that, like when you're driving down the road in traffic. And then there's other times like when you're nature journaling where you need to be able to turn that off, because that is, or just experiencing life, you need to be able to turn that off, because that's like one of the, and you see it in relationships also. It's like you take for granted the people that are around you every day. And so there's these things that we can learn from kids. And so I see teaching as a two-way street. And I really think learning is, learning is the thing that is the big category, and teaching should be thought of as kind of like a small part of that. And yeah, so those are a couple. I'm kind of just going off on a tangent there.
No, that's great. Yeah, the idea that your students are your teachers and that there's not this hierarchical structure is really a positive way to think about it, and that you're learning in a loop from each other. I love that.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about your Nature Journal show because it's just so fun. You do so much amazing stuff. And of all the people producing content about nature journaling, you're the one who does content about super practical stuff, like about how to do it in the field, how to choose the right stool, how to carry your kit, and how to nature journal in extreme places, like in the water, mm-hmm. in a kayak. Mm-hmm. I love this so much. Uh-huh. Tell me about that, about making content for the Nature Journal show. How do you come up with these amazing ideas? Do you you're just nature journaling and you think, oh, this would be good for a video? Or tell me about your process.
That's a good question. I think sometimes, I try to come up with a list, and sometimes I have a running list of things that I want to do episodes about. And the thing is, like when I started, I think I've had a YouTube channel for a while, but I was doing nature journaling stuff for a while, but it wasn't until it's been a little bit over a year. I think maybe 2019, like in September, I said, okay, I'm going to do one every single week. Mm-hmm. So I think it's been a little bit over a year. And at first I was like, oh geez, if I'm doing one every week, I'll probably run out of things. And now I'm like, there's no way that I'm going to run out of things. And, there's a lot of challenges. Like at first it was like hardly getting any views, and it's still like, if you look at it and for the amount of time I put in, compared to other things, it's hardly any views, like if it was about photography or whatever, like nobody's searching. And like I do some research into like what people are searching for. So I do some research on Google and YouTube for what people are searching for. And most of the things I'm making, most of my search terms, no one has ever searched. 0 people search for it per month. Like no one is searching for how to nature journal on a kayak. Maybe, but when that person does, you better believe my video is going to come up number one for that search term. And so I have a ton of videos that are like that. And I have a few, like the ones about how to nature journal for beginners, or there's a couple that like they actually are search terms that a lot of people are looking for. But most of them, it's, I just have to be like, you know what, this is something I want to do. And
but
I'm
it's growing, and you've just reached a big milestone with your subscriber
right
base.
Yeah.
You reached 1,000, which is amazing. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
You're growing, to my eye, seems really fast lately.
Yeah, I think that people have been online a lot, and at home a lot, and that nature journaling community in general has grown a lot during COVID. So I think that, and I'm just making a lot of content. And so it just like doing the interviews also is really fun.
Yeah.
And it takes, the videos, like the kayaking video, I probably spent so much time making that one. The interviews are nice because it takes a little bit of the pressure off of me, and there's so many cool people to talk to. that's really fun. But yeah, I just like coming up, like the one I'm working on right now is how to nature journal in the dark.
Marley,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, and I mean, I've done nature journaling in the dark some before, and so I have some ideas about it. And so last week, I think you call it rock pooling.
Mm-hmm.
We call it tide pooling. And I went at night because the low
Oh,
tide,
wow.
well, the really good low tides right now for me are at night. And I had never done that at night in California. I had done it in Costa Rica before, because there's some edible mollusks and crustaceans that people collect there, and at night they're like moving around more, but I had never done
Wow.
it here in California. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. It was really cold, it was really dark, and I was driving out to the beach and everybody's driving the other direction, and I was just like, oh, it doesn't feel right, it feels weird. I got there and I have like filming stuff and nature journaling stuff. I don't know, like, it's a new thing, and it ended up being amazing. And there were so many more creatures out than during the day, because I
Oh,
spend a lot of
wow.
time rock pooling during the day, and I go at all the negative, like when we have really extreme tides, I'm always out there. But it was totally different, and I had a black light so I could see like what was reflecting the UV light. And there was all kinds of creatures out that I had never seen before, and
Wow.
it was awesome. So I think when I think about it as, I have to think about it really kind of in going back to the growth mindset, is I have to think about it as like, maybe no one is going to watch this. I'm not making any money off of this. And, people might not like this. It's probably not going to apply. Most of the people who watch my videos probably don't even live near a coast, and they're probably not going to go out there at night. A lot of people are older and all of that. But if I'm having fun doing it and it forces me to go nature journal and to push the envelope a little bit more, then I'm going to do it. And so I have to that's the way to stay sane and to stay sustainable, is to think about it like, at the very least, I'm going to learn something and have fun.
Yes.
And maybe there's going to be like 10 people who are just like, their life has changed, or even one person. If you can just affect one person, then it's worth it. But just trying to not have like this expectation, like this is going to go viral.
Yes,
There's
yes.
not going to go viral.
No,
Maybe
but
in 20 years.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think the benefit of it, even if it's not like an instructional video for someone to counsel them on how they can go rock pooling at night, it's going to be fun first, super
Mm-hmm.
fun to watch, but also to get people's blinkers off and to say, really, the point of it is to say, you can nature journal anywhere. You can nature journal in the
Yeah.
dark, you can nature journal on a kayak, you can nature
Mm-hmm.
journal in the water. And so you're taking off people's, you're removing barriers. So you're saying, just think outside this box and see what
Yeah.
you can do. What extreme places could you nature journal? Really, that's what I take from it.
Yeah, definitely.
I saw something of yours yesterday, and it was that you were nature journaling out on the beach, and it was a really nice video. But one of the things that made me smile so much was you were saying, "See this hat? You think it's just a hat, and you took off your hat, and you've got color pencils stashed in a
Yeah.
secret pocket in your hat." And I just
Yeah.
thought, that's Marley all over. That's awesome.
Yeah, that hat was really funny. Like when I saw that it had that was for my Grand Canyon trip, and I was testing all this like waterproof stuff and everything. And I actually, the first time I used that hat, I had a small waterproof paper notebook, maybe like something like the size of my hand, and then I had these colored pencils, and I had a one of these like astronaut pins that they
Okay.
send into space, and it's supposed to work with water or work in zero gravity, upside down, all of that. And I put it in the hat, and I swam out. The first time I used it, I swam out into a pond, and I tried to tread water and nature journal while treading water. And then
How did that go? Was
it
that
went
successful?
okay. I did water polo in high school, so I can tread water pretty well. But and then I went over to the edge, and so I've experimented a little bit. The pocket and the hat ended up not being I do use that hat a fair amount still, but it was a good thing to try. And also, if any part of you is going to stay dry, more dry, it's probably going to be up there. So yeah. And I thought, that would be funny. My girlfriend thought the hat was super dorky, and so I kind of made that video of like, it's dorky, but that was on Instagram, right? It's dorky, but I was like, I don't care, this.
It just made me smile so much. I loved it.
Good. I'm glad.
I'm interested. I've been thinking a bit about nature journaling specialists and nature journaling generalists. So there's people who do a bit of everything, and I guess I would put myself in that category. I'm like looking at moss and birds and grasses and fungi, and then there are people who just do one thing, like just birds or just insects, and they go really deeply into, and they drill down into the details. And I love this. You sort of know what you're getting, and the depth of it is really profound. And I'm interested in your thoughts on nature journaling generalists versus specialists.
This is one of my, I haven't applied it specifically to nature journaling, but generalist versus specialist is one of my, one of the subjects I'm most interested in. And obviously, like in biology and ecology, this is like a very interesting and well-studied subject, and it's one of those that's very tempting to apply or to make analogies between like cheetahs versus crows and and humans, and different periods in human history. So this is like generalist versus specialist is one of my all-time favorite subjects, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I think I'm going to have to make a video about nature journaling, generalist versus specialist. Definitely. Because I had not really applied it to that, but just kind of like from a theoretical kind of big picture perspective, specialists go extinct and way more easily than generalists do. And I think our species is a perfect example of a generalist. We can't run as fast as a cheetah. We can't climb as well as a squirrel. We can't swim as well as a dolphin. But none of those three animals can do all of those things, and we can. And that's amazing. Our hands even, our hands and our sensory systems are all saying that we're generalists. The fact that we live on every single part of this planet is a sign that we're a generalist. So I think just recognizing, first of all, that we are set up to be generalists, and on a anatomical level and on a cognitive level as well. And so different periods in history and different cultures have gone to extremes with this. And I think for 99% of our existence as hunter-gatherers, we were generalists. Every single person in a hunter-gatherer tribe during 99% of the time that we've been on this planet, every single one of those persons was a primary food producer. They knew how to get all of the food that they needed, and it wasn't until, there's some hunter-gatherer tribes that had such rich resources that they could support specialists. But for the most part, it wasn't until the Neolithic 10,000 years ago that we could support anyone being a specialist, baker, brewer, preacher, and so just kind of like from a historical and anthropological perspective, the transition from being everybody being a generalist, and everybody would know about medicinal plants, everybody would know how to dig up edible roots, everybody would know how to make their own clothing, make a shelter and survive, to a society where, there's some people that all they do is design zippers. Yes. and they depend on other people for everything else. And, you can go into all of these analyses of that. And in the natural world, it's very interesting as well. Like I mentioned, cheetahs. Cheetahs are a good example of a specialist. They've gone through a genetic bottleneck. They might not be around in 100 years, whereas, cockroaches, domestic cats. Well, domestic cats are kind of a weird example. But so that's sort of just kind of a big picture thing. And so as far as nature journaling goes, I don't like having a really strong opinion about things that I don't know that much or haven't thought that much about. So I haven't applied this to nature journaling, but I would say it's just an area to be intentional. And so like, and to practice that metacognition. So notice in your own nature journaling, the problem would be is if you're only nature journaling plants and you don't know why, or maybe you have a story that, oh, I just like plants. That's just a lot of times people will say that's just my style. And that to me is usually an indication that they have underlying things that they haven't examined. And that might actually be preventing them from growing. So I think, just being self-aware and trying to figure out, you might not have a clear answer, right away, but trying to figure out, okay, I'm noticing that I'm really only doing this one thing. Where does that come from, And if you are jumping around a lot, maybe that could be something underlying also, like maybe you're afraid of committing to one thing, or some people are afraid of success, or like afraid of getting really good at something, and they change from job to job, or relationship to relationship, or subject to subject, or hobby to hobby, because somewhere in their mind they're kind of like preventing themselves from like pushing past a certain plateau. And these are things that you might never have like the actual real answer to, but I think just the process of thinking about it and trying to figure out is useful. And then the second one I talk about in my mindset video, which I did one for Wild Wonder, but I also have one on my YouTube channel. I talk about this idea of having your fuel. So one of the motivational things for nature journaling and for other things is to have to know what fuels you. And so the way I think about it is that we all have our bread and butter, which is like the thing we could nature journal with our eyes closed or whatever. We have our juice, and our juice is like the thing that's like, even if we're tired, it will give us, we're so interested in that subject or that technique, artistic technique, that it gives us juice. It gives us energy even if we're tired. And then the other one would be our growth edge. So there's probably artistic techniques or subjects, like a lot of people won't draw moving animals, or they won't draw certain types of animals, or they won't draw people, for example. And so that could be your growth edge, and just understanding that and being realistic with yourself, because some people will be like, say they're pushing themselves too much, and it's like a day where they want a nature journal, but they're already tired, or maybe it's after lunch and they're feeling tired, and then they're gonna try their growth edge. That's probably not very self-aware or very good self-coaching. If you're tired, you need to either do your bread and butter or you need to do your juice, because what will happen is if you're already not really set up for something and then you try to push yourself, like if you're a specialist on plants and it's a day something happened to you, or for whatever reason you're kind of not having a good one, and you decide, like, for whatever reason that day you're going to try nature journaling, the thing you normally don't, that could end up causing like you to mess up the page, or like your page doesn't look good, and then you'd be like, I'm never drawing animals again. So I think that's why I like creating a vocabulary around these concepts, because when we have words for them, we can talk about them, we can recognize them in ourselves, and then we can make intentional choices. And if you want to grow as a nature journaler and get better, there's probably times where it would be good for you to specialize more, and other times where it'd be good for you to branch out more. So I think just being, self-aware and sort of developing a vocabulary in our community to talk about these things. And I love that way that you applied generalist versus specialist to nature journaling. That's super cool. And that's exactly the kind of thing, having those terms and being able to recognize them, that will help us move forward for sure.
Oh, fantastic answer. Wow. I love that you've got this vocabulary like bread and butter and juice. I love that. Something that gets you going, something that's pushing you forward. And the growth edge, that's really powerful too. Yeah, I can't wait to see your video on specialists and generalists. So this is your life. Nature journaling is your life. And I'd love to know, what do you hope to bring to your audience through your work? What's your main message that you'd like to give?
Yeah, I'm here to help people see more. When I was a kid, I remember like pointing up in the tree and like, look, there's an iguana, there's a green iguana in that tree. And other people hadn't seen it or didn't notice it, and it took them a while to see it. But like, that's one of my earliest memories. Or I remember going to the zoo in San Diego. It's a world famous zoo. And when I was a kid, we would have family or friends visiting from other parts of the world. And I would just love like finding the animals. Like we would get to the different exhibit and it's like, where is it? Like everyone's like looking, and I would like finding it and helping show that to people. And whether that's things inside of people or outside of people, it's all the same to me. So I want to help people see more. And I think through seeing more, people can develop a connection. And when they see things, they can develop a connection to it, an awareness to it. They can make better decisions, and they can have a richer experience, because I think that we are seeing animals, we're visual animals, and we have the hardware to be very observant and to have a very, very rich experience. And there's so much beauty, and there's so much meaning, and so much complexity, and I want to use the word intelligence and like design and ideas and all this stuff in the world, that it's a shame to go around and not notice these things.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're in this wonderful world. We have this small dash of time that we're going to be here, and we need to take it all in, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Marley, how can people find you online? What's the best place to find you?
Yeah, if you can spell my last name, you can find me anywhere. And so it's Peifer, Marley Peifer. And, if you search Marley Peifer, my website's just marleypeifer.com. I'm Marley Peifer. If you find me on YouTube, I'm Marley Peifer. I'm Marley Peifer on Instagram. Some genius, when my ancestors immigrated to US, changed the spelling of my ancestors, but they didn't for the rest of the German Pfeiffers. And so people are constantly misspelling my name. But if you search for Marley Peifer, Peifer, you can find me. And, Instagram is a good place for kind of daily or almost daily stuff, and kind of, surprise stuff. YouTube's definitely like the most consistent and really where I'm putting a lot of energy. My website is good too. You can get all my YouTube videos there, and you can find out about like the Nature Journal family thing that I have coming up, and also my one-on-one coaching on my website. And on Facebook, I do some stuff on Facebook too if you want to connect there.
Wonderful. I also want to direct people to Patreon, because you have a Patreon account. And I think it's really important because you are putting out all this content. You're making weekly videos. You're putting out all this stuff. And if anyone wants to support that, they can just give a small donation on Patreon, and that really helps, doesn't it?
Yeah, so Patreon's like, if you want some behind the scenes stuff and you want to, be a part of the work that I'm doing, Patreon is where to go. And I'm just Marley Peifer at patreon.com. And, like last night we had a holiday party on Zoom with a bunch of my patrons, and I put out, videos that don't come out anywhere else. And people who are patrons on Patreon, they also often get some of my publications. Like I compile pages from my nature journals and send them out to all those people.
Perfect. Marley, thank you so much. It's been amazing. You have just this incredible depth of knowledge, and you can speak so eloquently about so many different things. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks. Yeah, it was fun. I'm so glad that you're doing a nature journaling podcast.
Thanks for being part of it.
All right.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with Marley. I love the way he doesn't have barriers to where he'll attempt to nature journal, in a kayak, while treading water, or in a rock pool at night. It inspires me to think where else I can nature journal. I really enjoyed learning about Marley's terms bread and butter, juice, and growth edge. I thought this was a really clever and useful distinction and something that can be used to either support or stretch ourselves at different times of our development. Marley has a new distance learning course available. It's a month-long course called the Nature Journal Family, which will be an opportunity for families to journal together and focus on deepening connections with nature and community. Marley will guide you through a lot of fun and engaging activities designed to bring in various curriculum areas like art, science, numbers, and language, as well as develop skills in scientific and critical thinking, self-awareness, and problem solving. To get more details about this new course, follow the link in the show notes for this episode. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.